All right. Hi, everyone. We just want to thank you all for joining us today to talk about a very important topic in our community around hate crimes, knowing our rights. My name is Tapar. I'm the executive director of the Burma Center here. Our mission is to really be an advocate for our community, and we just really want to make sure that we have a platform where our community are able to ask important questions about their safety with those who are here joining us on the panelists regarding potential hate crime because of the false narrative that Asian Americans are carriers of the virus. And so what we're going to do is we're going to invite the panelists to introduce themselves. But before we do that, we do have some important guidelines that we want to invite everyone to follow. And one of them is that please do not post any unnecessary comments on the chat box. That is reserved for questions for the panelists. If we see that you posted something unrelated to the conversation today, or if there are messages targeting certain individuals, you will be removed from this chat box, from this webinar. So we invite you to be patient with us as we try to learn how to host a successful webinar. And so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and let Sunita introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dodamani. I am with the Michigan Attorney General's Office. I work for Dana Nessel, the Attorney General. I am head of the Hate Crimes Unit at the department, and I've been a prosecutor for over 15 years. I spent about 10 years in Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and another 5 years in Macomb County Prosecutor's Office. I have tried hate crimes cases before, and I'm happy to be here.
Pastor Gilbert, would you introduce yourself?
My name is David Gilbert. I'm Calhoun County Prosecuting Attorney. I've been your prosecutor for the last 7 years. Before that, I was in private practice.
Deputy Chief, would you introduce yourself?
Hi there, good afternoon. My name is Jim Grafton. I'm currently the Deputy Chief of the Battle Creek Police Department. I've been an officer for 27 years, in the last 24 here with Battle Creek, so glad to be here.
Sheriff Hinckley.
Hi, my name is Steve Hinckley, and I am the Calhoun County Sheriff. I've been a policeman for almost 30 years, and I was in charge of our Detective Bureau and our major crimes. And I have taken over for retired Sheriff Matt Saxton approximately 2.5 weeks ago. So I am the new county sheriff. So thank you for having me.
Ron Robinson.
Hello, I'm Ron Robinson. I'm an assistant attorney general, and I am the chief of the Attorney General Nessel's Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Division. I've been an assistant AG for 36 years, and I've been in her Civil Rights and Civil Rights Division for that entire period. I'm glad to be here, and thank you.
Thank you. And then Agent Joseph.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Lupinacci. I'm with the Detroit FBI. I'm the Civil Rights Coordinator in that office, and I serve as a special agent. I was an attorney for 8 years, Assistant Attorney General in Illinois. And so I'm excited to be here. And on the line also is Special Agent Kaylee Barker. She's a civil rights agent as well in the Detroit FBI office. She called in. I'm not sure if she's muted or not, but introduce Kaylee as well. So thanks, everybody. Happy to be here.
All right. Todd, should I just say what I'm here for?
Yes.
Yeah. So my name's Mari. I'm with the Burma Center. I'm just here to help moderate things and keep track of the chat box. So thank you.
And with that, we're going to invite Sunita to kick off the presentation. Thanks, everyone, for your patience as we try to navigate this webinar.
Oh, sorry, double thanks, everybody, and I apologize anytime my children come and interrupt what I'm trying to say. I was really happy that Todd reached out to us to ask us some questions about hate crimes, because we have seen in the country just a rapid rise of hate crimes all over sort of nationally. And I was excited that approached us to kind of be proactive so that people have knowledge and can know how to handle things like that. So she had a number of questions for us, so I put together some slides. I thought the most important thing to start off with was to just kind of give you some background, talk about what exactly a hate crime is, sort of tell you about the legal definition of it. So essentially, a hate crime is a category of crime. It's any crime where a person is targeted because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, or disability. And that is a category of crime called hate crime. So the question is, what if a person is committing this crime, but they are wrong? So what if the person committing the crime is wrong about the person's race, religion, national origin, something like that? So let's for instance, say that they thought that I was Pakistani, but in fact I'm Indian. So even if they're wrong, that still qualifies as being a hate crime. So whatever the person perceives you as, if it fits in any of these categories, that is still a hate crime. Another question is, what if race or ethnicity is only one of the reasons the victim is targeted? So that is still considered a hate crime. So let's say that you have a situation where you know the person and you get into a fight about something, and then all of a sudden they're also injecting into this fight, into this assault, racist language, and one of the reasons that they are committing the crime is because of a person's national origin or race. That still is a hate crime. So that still falls in the category of a hate crime. A hate crime, like I said, was a category. So the familiar one that happens in Michigan, where charges are oftentimes issued, are ethnic intimidation. So that's either an assault or a damage to a person's property or a threat to do either one of those things. There's other types of hate crime besides just assault and damage to property, like ethnic intimidation. There's also stalking or bomb threats or cyberbullying. If it's done because of a person's race or any of those listed factors that I talked about, then that is considered a hate crime. So people often ask, what's the difference between a hate crime and kind of any other crime? And hate crimes are crimes that are trying to send a message to a whole community. They can be more violent because oftentimes they are crimes of passion when people don't like a specific race, religion, national origin, sexual orientation. And they have a bigger impact on like a crime that's just against one person or more individualized. This kind of crime is against an entire community, and the entire community feels that effect of the crime. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Here on the left, you see a picture of a car that's damaged with sort of random graffiti etched into the hood of it. And the difference between a crime and a hate crime is that the one on the left, where you have this damage to the vehicle, is like a random crime. Whereas the pictures I'm showing you on the right now, where it's a specific message towards a race or religion, that's different. Because if you come out of your house after being in your house all night and your car is parked in your driveway and it looks like the one on the left where there's sort of random damage, you might be coming out and thinking, well, oh, these teenagers, or how terrible. This is an individualized crime. Whereas the pictures you see on the right, if you came out and you're Jewish or you're African American and you see these symbols on your car, it's going to have a bigger impact on you, because you're going to wonder, is my family safe? Should I be moving? Is this my neighbors who's doing this? What kind of a message is it going to send? And anyone else that sees it or hears about it is going to hear about that neighborhood being unwelcome to African Americans or to Jewish people. So it has a larger, broader impact. And if people can understand the difference there between the picture on the left and the pictures on the right, then they have a feeling of what an entire community feels when they hear about a hate crime. So just to give you some data on hate crimes in Michigan generally, let's see. So in Michigan, law enforcement agencies have to keep track of hate crimes by law. It is by law required of all jurisdictions in Michigan. Michigan State Police then takes that information and puts it into a report once a year where they detail all of the hate crimes broken down by categories. The FBI also has to do this for hate crimes for the entire country. So some of the data that comes from those, this is from FBI statistics, but shows between 2015 to 2018, there was at least a 22% rise in hate crimes. And you'll see the numbers are thousands across the nation. The number of incidents in Michigan, FBI has different criteria on what they consider hate crime versus Michigan. So I'm showing you both charts here. The chart on the left is the one from FBI, and the one on the right is from Michigan. You'll see that they generally track with each other. And the one on the left shows a 40% rise, and the one on the right shows a 34% rise. 2018, by the way, is the latest statistics that we have on hate crimes. That's because their period of time that they keep track runs from, I believe it's March to March, and then they take about 6 months to issue the data. So the latest statistics we have came out in, I believe it was October for 2018 statistics. So if you look here, bias motivations, they generally track with Michigan, and the nation kind of looks around the same. So you have race and ethnicity being the majority of hate crimes in Michigan. 15% being religion, 13% being sexual orientation, about 3% being other. And you'll see that in Michigan in 2018, only 5 incidents were reported that were anti-Asian. So by category, you'll see that crimes against individuals are the ones that are the most. And that means things like assault, individual crimes, where it's one person committing another crime on another person, versus the smaller amount being 13% crimes against society, 6% crimes against businesses, 4% crimes against police or government, and 1% being other. This is by offense type. This shows that assault and intimidation are generally the most common, and that damage to property and a lower level assault is what the breakdown is there. About a third of those involved the use of a weapon. So though it was a lower level assault or something, about a third of them involved a weapon. So this is a map that shows generally the breakdown of incidents as required to be kept by Michigan State Police. All the counties in Michigan, if they're circled in red, that means either 10 incidents or more happen. And if they're circled in blue, that would be 5 incidents or more. I tell you to disregard all the statistics that I just showed you. And the reason is because what we know about hate crimes, studies show this and reports show this, is that people just don't report. It's roughly only about 3% of hate crimes get reported to law enforcement. So we often get the question, well, how do you know what's not being reported if it's not reported to you? Well, the answer to that is that the FBI sends out something called the Crime Victim Rights Survey. I might be getting that exact wording wrong, but it's like a crime victimization survey where they send that out and they get a number of responses back, and that shows that what's actually being reported out there is really only about 3% of what's happening. So to put that in perspective, the FBI stats show that for the year 2018, there was over 7,000 hate crimes. Those are the ones that are reported. If you think that's 3% of what's actually out there, then that's roughly 250,000 hate crimes nationally that should be being reported, and only 7,000 or so get reported. So the difference between hate crime and hate speech, Ty asked me to talk about this because this is something that we're hearing a lot of. You're hearing, Asian Americans out on the street are getting screamed at by random strangers. So what's the difference between hate speech, like someone screaming at you, random stranger, and hate crime? And is there a difference? Are there some words that rise to the level of a crime? So hate-filled speech is actually not. It's protected by the First Amendment right to free speech. And as a result, that's not a crime. So if someone is standing on a sidewalk and they're just yelling at you, that's not a crime. But there's some categories of speech that do rise to the level of a crime. So I listed some out here. And again, this is sort of a case-by-case basis, you know, where you have to determine all of the facts to see if it fits into one of these. But words with action that are considered crimes, so things like stalking, so that's multiple incidents where they're targeting you and they are targeting a specific person, and they are doing things that are considered harassment, and this is like a pattern of behavior. Cyberbullying is one. Bomb threats. So again, these are words, but they're often coupled with actions. Lying to the police is a crime. That's speech that is criminalized. Ethnic intimidation. So if you are threatening someone and you are threatening them, like I kind of previously talked about, if you're threatening them because of race, religion, national origin, any of those reasons, and you are threatening to either assault them or damage their property, and that's a threat that can reasonably be carried out, then that is ethnic intimidation, even though that is just speech. False report of a felony is another speech crime, or making a terroristic threat is another speech crime. So people have asked specifically about any COVID-related fueled hate crimes that we've seen in Michigan. So we're not seeing violence in Michigan right now. Mostly what we're seeing is Zoom bombing, which involves having a Zoom meeting just like this that's open to the public, and then people come on to the meeting and they scream and yell, or they show pornographic images or obscenities or things like that. And sometimes they're doing that during religious meetings. And so that's what we're seeing mostly in Michigan right now. We haven't seen, as far as I know, any specifically violent crimes against Asian Americans. We have seen reports about that around the country, though, mostly in New York and California. I heard about a horrible incident at like a Sam's Club or something in Texas the other day, where a young child and their parent was stabbed, Asian American family, where the attacker was screaming things about coronavirus. We have seen some in London, England. So what can you do if you're the victim of a hate crime? So I'm going to turn this over. I think Sheriff Hinckley said that he could cover some of this.
Yes. All right, perfect. So let me tell you a little bit about the law enforcement side and what our responsibilities are. We encourage you to report anything that is close to a hate crime. Let us take the information. Our job is to collect information, collect evidence, complete a police report, and send it to the prosecutor's office. It's so very, very important that you report this. I was actually surprised to see the low amount of reporting during these incidents. It should be much higher, and we encourage you to contact us and let us make a police report. That way we can really tell where these things are happening at, when they're occurring, and we can use law enforcement and try to maneuver into those type of areas and try to make sure that we can stop these type of things. Move on to the next one. Let's talk about evidence or graffiti for a second. So what's important, and everything that I talk about right now is if it's safe to do so in some of the things that I talk about. But we'll talk about evidence for a second. If someone puts something on a wall at a building, somebody marks something, it could be chalk, whatever the case, do not wash that off. Make sure that you call the police first. Let us come. We're very interested in taking photographs of that and collecting evidence. And so why do we collect evidence? Well, we want to collect a photograph of that, so if we do prosecute someone, we could show the judge or a jury what exactly happened. And a lot of times photographs explain exactly what occurred to a jury or a judge. So don't wash anything off until law enforcement is there and they collect that evidence. Let's talk about injuries photographs of injuries or the graffiti. So once in a while, somebody may do something or leave some evidence that may be gone before the police can get there. It could be in snow, it could be something that's melting. If it's safe to do so, and you could use your cell phone, if you could take some pictures of those, for the police officer. And then when the police officer arrives, we can collect that, or you could email that or text that to us, so we could have that if possible. The next is writing down exactly what's said. Very, very important that if you have an interaction with someone, it's very important that you keep good notes on exactly what they said, how they said it, and be very, very specific. So let me give you an example. If you're involved in an incident and you are calling the police, between the time the incident occurs and the law enforcement and the time that the law enforcement officer arrives, it's a good idea to jot down some notes. So you can, because it's very important. Obviously, when something happens, it may take an officer maybe 5 minutes. It could take them 30 minutes to get there. So it's very important to make sure that you remember exactly what happened and the exact wording that was used. That could be very important in some of these cases. We'll move down to writing down a description of the person. So if it's safe to do so, if you write down, or if the person may be leaving in a vehicle and you can take a photograph with your cell phone, if it's safe to do so, write down, jot down, take a photograph. If you could see a license plate as the vehicle's pulling out and you jot down that license plate, that could be very, very helpful to the police officers when they arrive in trying to find that person to get that information in the police report. And it's also important, we'd like to know race, gender, what that person was wearing, you know, whether they had a beard or a hat or the color of their clothing, their voice characteristics, did they have a very gruff, deep voice? So everything that we could tell about that person is very, very important when you're reporting that to us. Asking for a translator if needed. If you cannot understand the police officer, or there's some difficulty in that area, make sure you ask and you tell the officer, or tell the 911 dispatcher. Tell them that you need some help with translating. And we have in our community, and I know Battle Creek in our area, we have some resources for that. So certainly when the police officer arrives, we can make that happen, so we can make sure that we understand you clearly and you understand us clearly, because we want to make sure that we do a good job and we get a good police report completed that we can send to the prosecutor. The next is, it's very, very important, and the police officer should ask you, are there any other things that have occurred in the area? Do you think there's other victims of what just happened to you? Is this occurring? So what we want to remind you of is we may not know everything. And so unless you tell us and you give us an idea that this could be occurring in different parts of maybe the apartment complex you live in or a work location, we may not be aware of other incidents that occur. And that's very important that we know everything that has occurred in the area, so we can collect all that information and we can get a good solid police report to send to the prosecutor, because sometimes there are people in the community that may not have reported it to us, but if you give us that information, we can approach them and we could possibly help them in this type of a situation. And then the last thing is make sure about what time this happened. Did this happen during a holy day or a special holiday? Was there something that really may have started a reason that this occurred? Is there something happening in our community? Was there something happening in the news that could have to do something like this? We will really pile that information together and make sure that we can do a good police report for the prosecutor's office. All right.
This is Jim Grafton coming in. Sorry about that feedback. Again, thank you for having us. So the next slide states, what should you do if you are targeted? You know, I'm gonna start off by immediately calling 911. As Sheriff Hinckley stated, when you call 911, if you are able to identify what language that you speak, the dispatch will immediately, they contract with a group, an organization called Language Line. If you are able to state what language you speak, or even if you can't even articulate that at that particular moment, they will immediately get language line on the line as a third person for the three-way line of communication. They will determine the language that is being spoken. And then once that is determined and established, the three-way line of communication starts for that translation between you, the translator, and the dispatcher. The dispatcher will keep you online and ask you a series of questions about what it had just occurred, whether it is in progress, just occurred, or it happened a little bit ago. Always remember that if you are in immediate danger, use 911 to your advantage. Your local police department will respond. I just want to take a quick minute and help you understand. When I say police department, there could be several different agencies that respond depending on where you're at. So if you'll notice in the photos that Sheriff Hinckley is in a brown uniform and I am in a dark blue uniform. That's because the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department does patrol the city of Springfield. I understand that some of the Burmese community live in the city of Springfield, and if something happens at your home, you call 911, you'll have a sheriff's deputy respond. If you are out and about and you're within the city of Battle Creek and you get into a car accident, or you're engaged in something else out there and you call 911, you may have a Battle Creek police officer respond. So regardless, you call 911, somebody is going to be there. It may not always be the same department, but they're going to provide the same service. So hopefully that helps out a little bit there. Remember that if there is a physical threat that is occurring and it's immediate in nature, you've got a couple options, right? And I would encourage you not to engage if you can help it, but always remember that you certainly have the right to defend yourself. Nobody has the right to come up and assault you and take advantage of you. You always have the right to defend. But if you can run, try and get into a safe location. You can try and hide, but again, you can defend yourself. If there's a verbal threat and people are saying mean things or accosting you verbally, again, call the police. And as the sheriff has stated, if it's safe to do so, we always want to make sure that is prioritized for you. If safe to do so, call the police. Write down the exact threat that was communicated to you. If it is electronic threat, you're able to do it, to provide a screenshot or save a voicemail so that the officers can see the screenshot or listen to the voicemail, that would be great. And again, try and get the best description they can of the individual that just verbally assaulted you or is threatening you. And then always note what direction they have gone. And this will happen. Dispatch may keep you on the line and continue to ask questions and give updates of the information that you're providing them. So as we are en route to a call, that's information that we look forward to hearing so that we may be able to cut them off if they're mobile, whether they're in a car or they're on foot. Again, if it's an electronic threat, do not delete it. That's the number one thing. Print it, photograph it, again, screenshot it, and then contact law enforcement. If it's a written or visual threat, handle it as little as possible. We do use this as an opportunity to collect as evidence to be put into a report and then ultimately submitted to our prosecutor's office if we're able to identify the individual and seek out prosecution. Again, contact law enforcement and just note the date, time, and location of it. Just understand that we are here for you, and we are going to aggressively investigate, and we're going to aggressively prosecute with the assistance of the Calhoun County Prosecutor's Office, and we're not going to put up with any of these hate crimes that are, against you. So we're here to help you, and please just call us, and we will come out. Thank you.
So I think Prosecutor Gilbert was going to go over this.
Okay, well, first of all, the Michigan Ethnic Intimidation Act is basically it's a 2-year felony. If you're being picked on, being harassed, intimidated, or some crime is being brought upon you because of your ethnicity, your race, color, anything else that is a suspect class in Michigan, it's a 2-year felony. Now, keep in mind, we don't have to just prosecute an ethnic intimidation offense. If somebody destroys your car, that's a crime in and of itself without race being involved. Somebody breaks into your home, that's breaking and entering a building, or actually a home invasion. So that could be a 15 or a 20-year felony. And we will charge the crime that fits. It doesn't have to be based upon the race, color, religion, gender, or national origin. But if it's if it's something greater, like a home invasion, if it's a 15, 20-year felony, we're going to be charging the 20-year felony. We won't just be charging ethnic intimidation. We'll be charging the crime that carries the most penalty.
Let me add here too. Thank you, Prosecutor Gilbert. The FBI, Joe Lupinacci, Agent Lupinacci is on the line, and I think we can talk to you about. We've talked a lot about local and state efforts. Joe, can you tell us about what the FBI does?
Sure. Thanks, Ethan. So the FBI has actually 12 offices in the state of Michigan, and I would be remiss if I didn't introduce other folks on our squad. I didn't the first time around. We have on the line, we have Mary Abuljud. She's in charge of community outreach. If you have any centers, schools, houses of worship that you would like the FBI to be in contact with to do a presentation or any type of outreach, Mary is an incredible resource. And you can call 313-965-2323. That's our main number. I'll give it again at the end. And talk to Mary, and you can set that up with her. And also we have an intelligence analyst who handles only civil rights crimes as well in our office, and she's also on the line as well. So I want to thank them both for being here with Agent Barker and I. So FBI, what we do is the primary federal agency responsible for investigating allegations regarding violations of federal civil rights statutes. We today Michigan civil rights statutes, and there's a little bit of a difference when it comes to U.S. statutes. So we try to work together as much as possible with the Michigan Attorney General's office and local prosecutors to ensure that no matter what the violation is, that justice is served, whether it's at the state level, federal level, local level, whatever have you. The civil rights program in the FBI is divided up into 4 subprograms. We have hate crimes, then we have color of law violations, which involve members of government or law enforcement that could violate someone's civil rights in their uniform, and human trafficking, and then freedom of access to clinic entrances, also known as the FACE Act. So hate crimes is one of the top priorities within the FBI due to devastating impact on communities that are where we're located in our homes and involve us. Hate against your community is hate against our community. That's a message we always try to get out as much as possible. And it's been said before, the most important thing to do if you feel like you're a victim of a hate crime, or you feel like you know someone that's a victim of a hate crime, is report, report, report. I know someone from the Anti-Defamation League, Carolyn Normandin. She's the regional director. She's on the line as well. And that's something that she preaches. And if she was unmuted right now, that's exactly what she would be saying. So report, report, report can't be more important than that. So how the federal level defines a hate crime is just a little bit different, but it's a criminal offense against a person or property motivated by the individual's bias against a race, religion, disability, ethnic national origin, sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity. It's a broad brush, and the most important thing to take away from that is the crime has to be motivated by the bias against that group of people, entirely motivated. At the state level, it's a little bit different, and the prosecutors on the line have talked about that. They've talked about how you can have a mixed motive, and it can be your bias against the group of people can just be part of what makes up the reason why you committed the crime. At the federal level, it's a challenge for prosecutors because it has to be entirely motivated by that bias. But we investigate hundreds of hate crimes every year, and we work to detect and deter further incidents through law enforcement support, training, outreach like this, partnerships with the good folks that are on the panel and on the line as well, and a number of community groups such as yours. And the FBI is currently investigating over 250 cases involving hate crimes nationwide. And to break that down, about half of those are race-based and the rest are split equally among religion, gender, orientation, ethnic origin, disability, and there's a lot of fair housing claims as well. And so we have what's a variety of civil rights statutes that we can use at our disposal, such as conspiracy to commit a civil rights violation. There's church arson prevention, which talks about intimidating or threatening to destroy a religious property. And then we have the Matthew Shepard and Byrd Act, which is our main civil rights act that criminalizes hate crimes against race, color, religion, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation. So if you believe you're a victim of a hate crime, we've talked about this before, if you think it's an immediate threat, like the officers have said to you as well, is call 911. That's your immediate response. The FBI is not going to be able to deploy to be a first responder in the urgency that you would need them on an exigent basis like that. But if it's not an immediate threat to life, then please call the FBI or call them second and let us know what you think happened that makes you a victim of a hate crime. We're happy to hear from you. My number is, and if you have a minute, you can write it down. We can talk about this after as well. 313-965-2323. 313-965-2323. That's the best way to reach us. That's going to go right to our headquarters office in Detroit. If it's not a Detroit matter, it doesn't matter. We cover all of the state of Michigan with our 12 offices. If it's a national level report, that's okay too. You don't have to worry about that. We'll route it appropriately. We have a federal fusion center, just like there is for the state level for 911. If you call the FBI office, you'll be routed through our National Threat Organization Center, and they'll disseminate it to the appropriate office around the world, wherever that needs to go. So please use us at your disposal. We're here to help you in any way that we can, and feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Joe. So next slide, if I can get this to advance. So what if it's something that's discrimination? It doesn't reach the level of a crime. So Ron Robinson is on the line. He's going to talk about the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Ron?
Yes, thank you. What if the underlying action does not rise to the level of a hate crime? Do you have a remedy under Michigan law? Yes, you do. The state has two state civil rights statutes, the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act and the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act, that will protect you if you are or you feel you've been discriminated against because of your race, your color, your national origin, your gender, religion, your sex. Michigan is unique in that we also prohibit discrimination based on height and weight, and also your familial status. So what are the areas protected by state civil rights law, civil protections? Well, they include public accommodation. And you say, okay, what is public accommodation? Well, any place that is open to the public, like a store or a restaurant. Say, for instance, you were denied entry into a restaurant and you believe it because of your one of these protected categories. Then you would have a complaint that you could file with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and they will enforce your public accommodation civil rights. Many times you, say for instance, in a store, if you were, and this came up in one of our questions before, is that, say for instance, you were in Myers or Sam's Club, and one of the other customers made a derogatory comment about you because of they felt you were of your national origin. That would be more akin to maybe a hate speech, and it may not rise to the level of a hate crime, and it wouldn't even rise to the level of protections under the Elliott-Larsen. However, if that same negative or derogatory comment came from a store employee or someone in management in the store, that would be a violation of your rights to public accommodation, and you could file a complaint with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, which would be investigated. And if they're found to have discriminated against you on that basis, there would be a remedy that you could pursue. Other type of harassments that are protected, employment harassment. You hear about this hostile work environment. Say, for instance, you're in your workplace and you're performing your job, and one of your coworkers harasses you either because of the COVID situation or other protected categories because of your race, your religion. You would be protected under the state civil rights laws if the offense was such that it was both either severe or pervasive. You say, well, what do you mean by severe or pervasive? Well, the less severe the conduct, the harassing or kidding in the workplace, the more frequent it has to occur. It has to be every day. It has to be 10 times a day. However, one threat of a physical or a physical nature would be enough to create a hostile work environment. So the more threat-based or a threat of physical violence, you don't need 12 acts of that every day. It also has to affect the terms and conditions of your employment. So if you've got a specific job that you have to do, and this constant harassment by a coworker is such that you cannot do your job, that would rise to the level of a hostile work environment because it is pervasive. One thing that people need to remember, just keep in mind when it's a workplace harassment, is that in order to hold the employer liable, you have to report that offensive behavior, that nature that is affecting the terms and conditions of your employment. If you keep it to yourself, then the employer can say, well, we couldn't take prompt remedial action because we weren't aware of it. So you have to make your employer aware of the offensive or hostile work environment that you're complaining of, and it has to be pervasive. There's a little bit of different rule when the harassment is coming from your manager. Again, it'd have to be severe or pervasive and threaten the terms and conditions of your employment. But if it rises to that level, then the employer might be strictly liable. And strictly liable means that you don't have to go through all of these proofs as to whether or not they were aware of the offensive nature. If it's coming from a supervisor, then they would be strictly liable for that harassing environment in the workplace. Other areas that it may come up in is in education. If you're discriminated against because of a protected category with regard to education or housing, you're denied housing because of your race, your color, your national origin, or your religion, that would be a civil, you would have a civil remedy under the Michigan Department of Civil Rights to file a complaint of discrimination in violation of state law. Unique to Michigan is that you do not have to exhaust your administrative remedies. You can go, you can file directly in state court under the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act and have a cause of action if you don't want to go the administrative route. But all of these avenues, all of these protected categories are available to you if they don't rise to the level of a hate crime. And it's good to know that you have some areas of relief if the harassing or offensive conduct does not rise to the level of a hate crime. So the Michigan Department of Civil Rights has 4 offices throughout the state. One is in Detroit, one is in Lansing, Kalamazoo, and I think they have a satellite office in Flint. If you have a complaint and you need to file a complaint with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, the number, I'll give you the Detroit office number. The Detroit office number is 313-456-3700. And if an issue that you want to raise to the Attorney General's office, we typically refer these matters to the Department of Civil Rights for investigation, but I can definitely be a conduit to those referrals. And my number is 313-456-0200. Again, my number in Detroit is 313-456-0200. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Ron. So one more slide here is just to talk about our unit information. So the hate crimes unit at the Department of Attorney General can investigate and prosecute crimes itself. So this is our contact information. Our phone number is here. Our email, phone number is 313-456-0200. Our email is hatecrimes@michigan.gov. I am the person that's listed there, and then we also have a portion of our website to file a complaint. There's a button on there that will direct you to our email address, and you can submit a complaint. Todd, I think we are available for questions if anyone has any. Other than that, I also wanted to just acknowledge that Carolyn Normanden's on the line. She's the regional director of the Anti-Defamation League, and they also take complaints as well.
That's a really good segue into introducing Carolyn. Carolyn, do you want to step in and share a little bit more about what you do and what you want the audience to know?
Sure. Thank you very, very much. I think all of the panelists today are providing excellent information. I work with all of the organizations that are represented here. ADL has been in existence for 100 years, more than 100 years. We're a civil rights organization as well. We track more incidents rather than crimes. We work with law enforcement when a crime has been committed. Some incidents of hate don't hit the benchmark of crimes, and Ron talked a little bit about that, but they're still very, very upsetting. So things that happen in schools or graffiti in a public place that maybe it's hard to prosecute because there's no way of finding out who did it. I think the most important thing is we all work together, and Joe talked about report. That's what I always say, because sometimes the ADL, because it's a private organization, sometimes we can put links together and help law enforcement, because if an incident occurs and we have a little bit of information about it, and then law enforcement has another incident, sometimes the two can be connected by the way the incident played itself out. So I would say, also, our website is adl.org, very simple, adl.org, like Apple, David, Larry.org. My phone number is 248-353-1148. That's 248-353-1148. I would also say that the Zoom bombing trend has been talked about. On our website, it's not just a reporting tool, it's full of all kinds of information that you can look at and get tips. And there's a very large section right now about Zoom bombing. So if you go to adl.org and you look through the tabs at the top of the page, you'll see a tab that says news. If you click on that, there's all kinds of information about Zoom bombing and how you can prevent it from happening, how the average person can put in stop gaps so that the Zoom communal activities that you're trying to do are not disrupted. So I would say thank you very much for putting this panel together. I think this is really important information. And I always tell the people that I work with, I don't look forward to talking to them, because that means it usually means that there's some sort of an incident that has occurred. But every single one of the people on this panel are really great resources, and ADL is proud to be connected with all of them.
Thank you, Carolyn. We did have some questions that the audience have, and the first question was around how do you take into account how traumatic these events are in the memory of victims? So I think what they're trying to ask is, during the prosecution phase, do you take into the account the trauma that victims are experiencing? And I think that's what they're asking. does anybody from the panelists want to answer to that question?
Yeah, I can answer that. As the prosecutor, we have a victims unit that actually works with victims. I answered that question online, just messed up a different one, I'm sorry. But as far as that question is concerned, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, you've got criminal and you've got civil, and you can actually bring a lawsuit for harassment, and you can receive civil damages. Typically, people don't have the kind of money to actually hire a lawyer and do that, so they're pretty much stuck with the criminal. But we do have victim advocates that advocate for our victims. And as far as restitution is concerned, if the conduct is so severe as that person needs counseling, other forms of help, any form of any counseling that needs to be paid for, restitution can be had from the offender.
Okay, thank you, Prosecutor Gilbert. The second question that we have is from Denise from MAPAC. She's asking, what should a student do if they experience verbal harassment or physical bullying in the school, bus rides, or walking around the school?
Steve,
Well,
want to do it?
Sorry, I
Go
was just unmuting. Yeah, so my understanding, so a lot of schools have a school resource officer that's assigned to the school. I would two things. I would go to the school administration and make an immediate report. And then secondly, if you have the case, you have a law enforcement officer assigned to the school, I would immediately make contact with them and make a report of that immediately. Absolutely. And if a parent is receiving that information from a child on any type of bullying, the parent should do the same thing, reach out, and then we can investigate and get some resources plugged into that situation. But that's a good question.
I would agree with what the sheriff just said. You know, there a lot of schools have anti-bullying programs, and you definitely need to report those incidents to the school administration so that they can be looked into.
And to add to that, not just for kids, but for grown-ups too, if you're being continually harassed by people, particularly adults, or threatened or intimidated by them, you can also receive what's called a personal protection order. We actually have one person assigned in our circuit court that all she does is review personal protection orders with people, getting orders to keep people away from other people.
Thank you. Another question from Jane. The question is, have incidents of hate crimes, particularly among our Asian Americans community, has risen since COVID-19? If so, do you have a percentage?
So I think I can answer that. There has been a rise, but there's also been more attention. So it's hard to tell exactly what percentage of a rise we've seen. But everyone knows, the more critical something gets, or the more stressful or during a crisis, the more people want to blame others. And so they'll pick a particular group and they'll take out their frustrations on that group. So I've seen a lot of hate crimes against Asian Americans all over the country being reported in the news, and that's bringing my attention to them. But the question is that more than out of the ordinary for right now, right? Or is it just that there's more attention being paid to them? So it's really difficult to tell.
You know, from the civil rights perspective, I think that, you know, the Department of Civil Rights has not seen a great increase, but I think the reason why is that people didn't know that if it didn't fall within didn't rise to the level of a hate crime, they didn't know that they could also report incidences of discrimination that occurred in housing or public accommodation to the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and they would investigate and pursue those claims.
It's Carolyn. I would like to also add, we've seen a rise at ADL. We've begun to track specifically the rise of incidents in terms of COVID-19. We've seen a tremendous amount of hate online that's moved from dark websites that most of us do not traffic in, but they've been finding their way onto digital platforms that a lot of people use, such as Facebook or Twitter. And these harassing kinds of incidents have to do with cartoons about shaking an Asian person's hand and then cutting off your hand, suggestions that people go cough or sneeze on Asian Americans, or not only Asian Americans, you know, immigrants in general, Jewish people in general. So these kinds of incidents are playing themselves out a lot on digital platforms. There have been also some incidents reported to my office where people that are Asian American have been yelled at on the street. And again, you can walk away from somebody who's yelling at you, but the harassment factor has gone up. I agree with Sita. It's very hard to say whether or not this is a new phenomenon. It's certainly, the incidents that have been reported to our office certainly have the idea that COVID is, the Asians are responsible for COVID, and immigrants are responsible for COVID, and Jewish people are responsible for COVID. So those, I would make that distinction between the general hateful rhetoric and the rhetoric that we're hearing now.
Thank you, Carolyn. The next question is regarding the language line services. Sorry, it moved up for me. So the question is the language line utilized by dispatcher across the state, and how effective do you find their service in more anxious, stressful incidents? Do you find the services that you have to be effective? That's what they're asking.
So I believe the language line is utilized throughout our region by most 911 dispatch centers. I can't say that all of them use it, but they are very successful, and it only takes seconds, really, once the language of origin is identified, takes seconds to get them on the line and to jump into the conversation. As far as do I feel like they're more anxious in stressful incidents, the dispatchers are trained through their years of experience to remain calm, to try and calm the individual that is calling, ask clarifying questions, get the important information, accurate information, so they can immediately get it out to the officers. I can't speak on the employees of language line, but I'm fairly certain that they would probably remain calm as well. So there can be very stressful situations when 911 is called, and the dispatchers are trained in that, and they have been very effective.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What can an employee do if he or she feels as being treated unfairly by human resource due to language barrier? I think that might be a question for you, Ron. So in the workplace, if an employee feels that they're being treated unfairly because of language barrier from human resource, what should they do?
Well, you know, these things happen quite frequently, where if it does affect the terms and conditions of their employment, if this ongoing harassment affects their ability to do their job, you get up in the morning and you say, I really don't want to go into work because the harassment will start over and over again, then that would be a hostile work environment. Again, it has to be either severe or pervasive. If it happens every day, 5-6 times a day, and it gets to the point where you cannot perform your job, then that is hostile work environment, and it is something that can be pursued under the civil rights protections of this state with the filing of either a complaint with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights or a direct action in circuit court. So that does not have to be tolerated in the workplace. Again, if it's from a coworker, it has to be reported to the management, because management will not be held liable if it's a situation they're unaware of. However, if they're aware of it and they don't act promptly to address the situation, they would be liable under state law.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So essentially, if the incident's happening among coworkers, first notify your manager so they are aware. And if you have report to them and the issue continues on, then that's when they would reach to your department to file a formal complaint. And the way how people would understand what a hostile work environment might be, signs that they could look for is when they're dreading to go to work because of the incidents that they might be experiencing.
their normal job functions they cannot do because of the ongoing harassment. And that would be part of the complaint that affects the terms and conditions of their employment. That's correct.
Okay. So I guess one example I have from my own spouse is that, so, he is Asian American. And so at work, with this COVID-19, he noticed that some of his coworkers actively trying to avoid being spaces with him. Even though he does not have to work directly with them, but there's this feeling of I can't talk to people or socialize because they're avoiding me. What about those kind of incidents? How should they address that?
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario. Again, I think what it comes down to is whether or not it does affect the terms and conditions of his employment. Does he feel that he's unable to perform efficiently the functions of his job because of the way coworkers are treating him? If that is the case, then he needs to bring that to the attention of management, and they need to. It's all about education. A lot of this is ignorance, and if this situation affects his terms and conditions, he needs to bring that to management's attention, and hopefully management will address this situation so that he can continue to operate efficiently in his job.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the attendees is, do you need to report the incident right away? The reason why they're asking is because sometimes you have to report in English, and when language is a barrier, it often kind of delayed the reporting process. And so do you have any advice on the time of when incidents are being reported on all levels, I guess I would say?
Sure. So there's two two sides to this for a minute. If you're in danger, or there's a public safety risk, or something's happening in progress, and your safety is at risk, it doesn't matter. You should call 911 immediately and get an officer on the scene. If there's something that isn't in progress, we kind of ask that you use your best judgment. We don't want you to wait a week or 2 weeks, but within the next few hours, when you get a family member there that can help you, just use your best judgment and then report it in that direction, in that means.
Usually the prosecution is the problem is in prosecution. When juries see that people have waited a long time before calling the police, they will feel that's a weakness in our case. However, if we got a language barrier and we got a reason why there's a delay in reporting, juries don't have a problem with that. And as far as issuing those charges, we do not have a problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
This is Ron. With respect to a complaint, if you file it administratively and don't hire your own attorney to pursue it in circuit court, the Department of Civil Rights has a 180-day statute of limitations, which means that they have jurisdiction if the incident that gives rise to your discrimination complaint occurred within 180 days of the event. So that should be kept in mind if you're looking for an administrative remedy.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. So another question from an attendee is spitting at one's shopping cart and an attempt to pull off one's mask in front of an Asian grocery, this has happened to be a real case, consider a hate crime or just some mere incidents?
So I think that goes back to what the definition of a hate crime is. So is there a crime, and is it motivated by a bias against the person? So in this instant, is it a crime? Well, it's physical contact, right? And is it motivated because of the person's ancestry or national origin? Yes. So in my estimation, that seems to be a hate crime. Now, what level of crime that is going to differ. And I know Prosecutor Gilbert can talk about this too, but spitting at someone's shopping cart, that's physical contact. An attempt to pull off one's mask in front of an Asian grocery store, that's physical contact. And if there's enough there for knowing that it's physical contact and knowing that it's motivated by a bias, then that is a hate crime. Prosecutor Gilbert.
Yeah, to add to that, obviously, anytime you're doing something that's assaultive like that, it is a crime. But we'd be looking at a little bit further. Is it because of hate, or is it because they're trying to scare you into thinking they're about to transfer a deadly virus to you, or if they do have a virus, if they are trying to give it to you? And in cases like that, we've got other crimes. Maybe you can help me on this one, Sunita. That it's we have a statute for, I call it domestic terrorism, but that's not what it's called.
Right, it's about intentionally transferring a biological substance. So in a sense, it would be like intentionally trying to infect someone with COVID-19.
Yes, and also making somebody afraid that they might be having it transferred.
That's right.
We have issues with people spitting on food in grocery stores right now, coughing on people, claiming that they have the COVID virus when they actually don't. That's not just an assault, it can actually be a felony.
That's right. So it's a false threat of a terroristic type of threat.
That's what I meant, yes.
Can you tell us the difference between assault and then like you know, what's considered harassment? Like where are the lines there?
Not all.
So,
Go ahead.
So assault, yeah, not all harassment is going to rise the level of an assault. But if you feel the harassment, the verbal harassment is going to, is targeted at you and is about to happen. So if I come up to you, Ta, and I say, I'm going to hit you, or I'm going to get you, and you start to make a motion, then that's actually assault. You're worried about getting battered. And that is where it crosses the line. You have to think about words versus actions. So words alone, not enough, but words coupled with an action may be enough.
Okay, all right. On this topic, I guess I have a question and I'll ask another question from the audience as well. So we talked about how you have the right to defend yourself if you feel like someone's going to come and attack you physically. Where is the line between you, the act of self-defense versus you becoming another aggressor in the situation where you will also be prosecuted because of your conduct?
You have a right to defend yourself up to the point where you become the aggressor. You cannot use deadly force for a crime against property. That means if they're scratching your car up, you don't have a right to kill them. But if they're taking physical force against you, or you're in reasonable fear for your life or somebody else's life, you have a right to take life. But remember, you cannot use any more force than is necessary to basically fight off the person that's attacking you.
Thank you. So a question from the audience is, should we be recording the verbal harassment in real time? Is that something that you would recommend?
So if it's possible, and just remember, everything that you do, you have to ask yourself, is it safe for me to do this? If you try to record something and it causes that person or people or group to engage you more or come after you more, you probably should go ahead and just leave the area and call law enforcement. If you can record it and you can record it safely, it certainly could be a good piece of evidence. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Denise from APAC. If a person received hostile harassment behavior while shopping, the first defense of the victim is to get out of the store. Who should they report to? Should it be the AG office, 911, Civil Rights Department, or all of the above?
You know, and this is Ron Robinson again. If it's from a fellow shopper, then they should probably report the incident to the store management. But if that would not be a situation where the Department of Civil Rights would have jurisdiction, because it's not an action by the store or one of their employees or management. So it wouldn't be something that would rise to the level of a complaint under the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. But again, it should be reported to management. They should want customers in the store to act in a reasonable manner and not be intimidated by other shoppers.
Okay.
Kind of what Sheriff Hinckley said before too, you always got to evaluate, are you in danger? And if you are in danger, you always call 911. Those are your first responders. And then if it's not a situation where it's involving a threat to your life or physical threat, you could contact all of us. We all work together too. That's the other thing to keep in mind, is that you contact one of us, you're essentially contacting all of us. There's no ego tripping, going on where it's like my jurisdiction, no, my jurisdiction. We're all working together and we're all filling in the gaps from everybody else.
Many times, well, I can't really think of any store that that would put up with that kind of conduct in it. They'd probably ask that other person to leave.
Thank you. So next question is for me, and the question is really like, what is the mood of people in Battle Creek, particularly in the Burmese community? Are they worried about their safety? And what prompted this Zoom meeting? So for the Burma Center, we've been monitoring COVID-19, not just like the health risk of being infected and how to care for yourself, but we've just been seeing posts on Facebook about individuals being harassed, while they're at Meijer, someone saying, oh, like, get away from me, you have COVID-19, just because they look and present as Asian American, that have happened. The incident in Midland, Texas, where a father and 2 of his kids were stabbed, those were Burmese, they were Burmese. And so that news has been circulating in our community. And so there's been this fear, to Sanita's point, how hate crime is not just targeting like the individual, but has a larger message and impact on the larger community. That definitely happened. We felt the pain across the state, and we want to make sure that we address the fear so that people know what their rights are and they know how to best protect themselves and know who to call if they are ever in any situations like that. Okay, so another question is, what is the Michigan Police Sheriff Department doing in terms of mitigating hate crimes?
So one of the most important things is we're collecting that statistical data, and we need you to report these things so we can tell exactly where they're happening at. Because in a lot of cases, a lot of our Battle Creek Police, our agency, we have resource officers that can visit your community, talk. You can educate us and we can educate you and we can talk about different things. But unless you report these things, we do not have that data and we're not aware that they're occurring. So it's very, very important that you report that.
I think,
Carolyn, I wanted to add to that. I couldn't agree more. It's why every one of us have talked about report, report, report. At ADL, we always say sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if you don't tell anybody and it just remains under the table, nobody knows about it. But when you do tell people, data drives decision making. So the data that the AG's office or the sheriff's offices or the FBI and all of that data that's being collected, or the ADL, helps us convince people that these are issues that need to be given resources and time and thought.
And I think in one of our prep calls, we talked about how even if the incident seems small and significant, you want to report, because if it escalates, then there is a way to track like what's been happening, so that you as a victim have more protection if things escalate. So another question from a participant, where do you report a cyber threat since it is in the cloud? Where is the locus?
Oh, okay. So, sorry, I wasn't sure if Prosecutor Gilbert was going to answer that one. So the locus or the location of the crime would be where the person is doing it, so where their computer is. But with these cyber type things, you don't know the answer to that. So what I suggest is reporting it. If you report it, that's something that law enforcement has to take the step to figure out. But if there's any indication that it's happening in the state of Michigan, the state attorney general's office, our hate crimes unit, can look into it. If it's localized to one particular jurisdiction or location, then you would, report that threat to your police.
Sita, can I just throw something in there if you don't mind?
Go ahead, Joe.
I just posted in the comments section a good website to post any type of cyber related crime. You can go to ic3.gov. I posted that in the comment section if you can see it. And there on that website is a whole form for you to submit computer-based or internet crime complaint center. That's part of the FBI, and that is fully staffed with an abundance of resources and analysts to comb through those types of internet crime complaints. And I think they're very active right now in terms of anything related to Zoom bombing, anything like that. But if you experience something you think is cyber related, then you can always file a complaint with IC3, Internet Crime Complaint Center.
Michigan State Police also has a unit that specializes in cyber crimes, and they can actually tell you where that person is sending the message from. Well, usually.
So the last question on the Q&A is very similar to the question that was asked earlier. And it is, what step is the state taking to stem the spread of COVID-related hate crimes?
So our Attorney General has spoken out pretty frequently here during this whole outbreak, calling for respect for Asian Americans, that the virus has no origin, it has no ethnicity, it has no race, that everyone can be affected and that no one is to blame, no one particular group is to blame. She's spoken up about it, as well as we have this hate crimes unit. So if you have an issue, you can report it to us and we'll take active measures to investigate and prosecute.
So someone said that they tried going onto the website that was listed on the screen and the page cannot be found. If someone could update the link. What I would say to all of you is what we're going to do at the Burma Center is compile all of the phone numbers, websites of the people that are here on the panels today with us, and we'll publish it. So if you need to get in touch with any level of, government, whether it's the city, police, law enforcement, or to the Attorney General office, we'll have that posted for you. I believe that is the end of our questions. Is there any last minute thing from the panel's participants that you would like to share with the audience that we haven't really touched on that you think is relevant?
Hey, Ta. One quick thing, there was another question in the chat box.
Would you mind reading it?
Yep, I can. The fear in the Asian community is making some people consider to buy, I think they meant guns, correct me if I'm wrong, considering to buy guns for self-protection comments, question mark.
Guns are legal in the state of Michigan, as long as you're legally authorized to buy one. It's not an issue. The issue is if you own a handgun, you should know the rules of the road as far as shooting that handgun. If you fire in self-defense, it has to be protection of a reasonable belief in protecting the life of yourself or somebody else. It's important that you don't make a mistake. Make sure that you're trained in gun usage before buying a gun. But that's totally up to the people of the state of Michigan. Thing is, we're interested in safety and security. Your best bet, if you're being harassed or intimidated by somebody and there is no imminent deadly threat, make sure you are calling the police. You don't walk out into the road carrying a gun expecting to make somebody go away and stop threatening you.
I just want to add on to that. If you're at that point where you're thinking about buying a gun, have you reported what's been happening to you to the police? Have you given them an opportunity to look into it and see if that we could help first? So just something to think about. If that's some things that you're thinking about, have we had the opportunity to try to help you, is my question.
There have been times in the past where the Burmese community invited us to speak to them because of the concerns that they had in law enforcement, whether or not they could trust law enforcement. People in the Burmese community, people in the state of Michigan should know that our law enforcement agencies are, well, they're here to protect. They're not here to take advantage of people. And if you believe a police officer is taking advantage of you, you let one of the people on the screen know and they'll take care of it.
Yes. We have been very fortunate in our community to have people that are very committed to the safety of not just the Burmese community, but the city of population here. So we thank you for your partnership in the previous events that we had to address. I believe we don't have any more questions. So with that, I just want to thank again to all of our panelists. If we were live, you would probably hear a round of claps, but since everything is web, you probably won't hear, but we're deeply, deeply grateful to you spending the time and the research to provide such an informative webinar for our community. I know that the audience that attended this webinar are not just Burmese American, but people of all different race and ethnicity. And so we're grateful for those that are able to join, for allies that are here trying to learn so that you know how to be a support to your Asian American friends as well. So I want to thank you all for that. If you have questions, you can always reach out to the Burma Center. As I stated earlier, what I'm going to do is compile a list of the correct email address, website, and phone numbers, and so that and we will publish that on our Facebook page so that you can follow up with the following individuals if you have additional questions. So with that, I think we can conclude our webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ta.
Thanks, Ta.
Thank you, Ta. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care now.
Thank you, everybody.